Welcome to Pirate Living Podcast. We are your hosts, Kristin and Karan. On this podcast, we are highlighting ordinary people living extraordinary lives. These are pirates who take small, bold actions daily to create social change. Pirate life is all about rebelling and breaking the rules for good. Creating lasting social change starts by first breaking our inner rules. After all, the hardest rules to break are your own. The pirates we highlight have dedicated themselves to creating good trouble.
On today's episode, we're sitting down with our friend Ryan Sprague. Ryan is a cannabis coach, and he helps leaders build purpose into their lives through the healing power of cannabis. Ryan is also the host of the Highly Optimized podcast and the One Time on Psychedelics podcast. Ryan is an Enlifted coach, which is where Kristin and I met him. And he is also the inspiration for the two of us when it comes to writing kick-ass intros for our podcast guests. So welcome, Ryan. We're so glad to have you on our podcast today.
I am so honored to be here with you ladies. It's so fun. We've already been chatting beforehand and we have such a good vacation vibration going. And to hear that my intros inspired you guys to write awesome intros like that, it's so awesome. And you crushed the intro. It's really funny because one of the things that I love writing intros for, and I imagine you ladies have the same perspective, is that it's really cool to be able to we all do a lot of big things, right? And we're constantly just doing more, and that's what we love to do. But it's great to be able to revisit our wins and be able to hear someone else reflect what they see us as and all of those things. So I am so excited to be here and riff with you ladies.
Yeah, absolutely. What I was going to say, one of my highlights so far on this podcast was Mike Bledsoe saying that my intro was the most accurate intro that he's had on a podcast. I was like, yeah, it is.
Yes. That's a great feeling,
Yeah.
It's an absolute great feeling, especially with someone like Mike, who's done so much. And there's a lot that you could put in this intro. I remember when I wrote his intros out, I was like, I can't spend 5 minutes on an intro. So I got to cut this down a little bit.
Exactly.
And we've both been blessed by your intros too. So
yes.
We wanted to bless you today.
Yes, I'm so excited. Yeah. And, we're going to have to do some round twos on Highly Optimized for you ladies as well. And, really create some more magic because, I'm starting to revisit a lot of the people I had on what seems like yesterday, but it was last year. I just released episode 76 today of Highly Optimized. It's like, whoa, what a whirlwind.
So, Ryan, you are known in our circle as a master storyteller, in case our audience listeners can't tell by now. And we would love for you to tell us the story of your own pirate journey.
Yes. Well, I love, that you guys are doing the Pirate Living podcast because, being a pirate to me is simply saying that you're going to live a life on your own terms and you're going to face the trials and tribulations that come along the way, because ultimately those trials and tribulations are the exercise that allows you to become who you're meant to be, right? So the same way that when you're in a gym, you want to do different things. You don't want to do the same things because it helps you grow and it challenges you and all of those things. When you decide to be a pirate, you open yourself up for, you never know what challenge is going to happen, right? You might start a podcast and all of a sudden the internet's down. You're like, what do? I got to hop on my phone. Okay. How do I plug a mic into my phone? Right. There's constant challenges, and it's exciting because, it allows you to be more well-rounded, and it also allows you to stay low and slow in your breath. Shout out to Enlifted. And, really allows you to, just be more well-rounded in responding rather than reacting. And so, for me, I knew from a very early age that something was different about me and how I wanted to live life. And the earliest memory I have of it is being in grade school. I'm talking from 1st to 4th grade. And you would get homework, right? And it wasn't even something that it took me a long time to figure out, but I would have, friends in class like, oh, darn, I don't want to do homework. And I was just sitting there doing the homework in class. You can see when the teacher's looking at you, you can just get the homework done and then you can go home and party. Right. So I knew right away, I was like, why doesn't everyone do this? And at that point I had no context for what I was tapping into or why I was doing that, but that expanded. And, throughout the rest of school, I people would get caught for things all the time and get suspended. And I was just skating by everything because I knew how to be charismatic before I even knew what that word was. And really all it was simply just being nice to people, right? when the security guard who would watch for people leaving school would be trying to catch everyone else, I would go greet them and be like, hey, how's your day going? Oh my God, awesome. And then I would just walk right out the door, and they would just never think that I was going to do that. Right. So I've had this way about me for a long time. And, again, we all have that same way, which is why we're all attracted to one another and why like attracts like, and why we're all on this podcast right now. And then, when I got into college, I knew about my junior year that I wanted to do psychology, right? Something in me was just like, that sounds fun, right? And I really loved like looking at things from different perspectives. And around the same time, I started experimenting with cannabis. And at that time, I was, dealing with some generalized anxiety disorder, nothing crazy, but enough that it was like starting to give me some challenges with like, dating women and things like that. And also I was a musician. And I had a lot of anxiety about playing in front of people, or even like playing for people. I remember my dad, he would have friends come over and be like, Ryan, play for them. And I'd be like, Dad, I got to warm up for an hour first to make sure everything's perfect. Right. And so this perfectionist type thing was coming in. And now I see that as just, pretty much anxiety. And so around this time, like I said, I would be hanging with friends. And of course, alcohol was the medicine of choice at that time. And I never liked it. Right. It just never worked for me. I would get a couple drinks in and I would just feel terrible. And so people started bringing cannabis around. And I'm talking like dirt cannabis, like the worst quality cannabis back then. But I would notice that, while they were all out, I had a party house my whole life, pretty much. Like my parents were really cool. And they were like, hey, if you guys are going to be hanging out, we'd rather you be here than anywhere else. Right. So I was really fortunate that my parents gave a safe container for us to, they didn't want us obviously interacting with things. If they caught us, we would have gotten in trouble. But, they were like, hey, we'd rather you be here. And, if you have a problem, like they were always really open with that. So I felt, nothing was really bastardized for me. Like nothing was ever like a no-no and talked about as like the devil or anything, which a lot of people had. And so, around this time, I started noticing that when I interacted with cannabis, something different than it seemed like everyone else was getting happened. Like they would want to hang out and talk, and I would take 2 hits and go inside and watch Star Wars for hours, right? And just think and be out of my mind in a good way, right? Like just be like my consciousness would elevate. Again, I didn't know any of this when I was 17, but this takes us into when I went to college. I noticed right away that I was like, okay, if I want to do anything with psychology, I have to get at least a master's degree, and I don't want to be in debt for school. I was trying to loophole my way around getting grants and everything. And I did so to a certain degree. I did owe a little bit at the end of school, but basically around my junior year, I was now very much interacting with cannabis. That was my only medicine of choice. I hadn't been drinking anything like that. And I started to get into health related things. And after a scare where basically when I was around 18, I went to the bathroom once and peed blood and was like, what the hell's going on? And it gave me my mortality crisis, which a lot of people talk about, with like, oh, you realize you're not going to live forever, right? It's like, I still haven't realized that. Challenge still accepted, right? But I noticed that like, hey, I should start taking care of this vessel that I'm in to be able to have the best experience of life. And so by my junior year, I was getting into exercise. I was getting the hang of like, quality organic food, things like that. And cannabis here in Massachusetts was not legalized yet. It was decriminalized. So I knew I wasn't going to get arrested for personally using cannabis, but there was no like, sight set on an industry. I thought I'd have to travel across the country if I ever wanted to do that, which was terrifying with the anxiety I was dealing with at that point. And then right around 2011, like in November of 2011, or September rather, I went to the Boston Freedom Rally. And that's like a, pretty much a public disobedience thing where everyone comes out and interacts with cannabis. The cops don't bother anyone as long as you're not doing anything really stupid. And so I went there and I hear this guy. I forgot my sunglasses. I got blue eyes. I can't see anything. I'm like trying to like block the sun. And I hear this guy yelling, who wants to make butter with me? And I'm like, well, I like making canna butter. So I go over and basically, long story short, he's creating an institute, a cannabis training institute, right? And in terms of marketing, this guy crushed it. He was like, get an edge on the coming industry, blah, blah, blah. Because at that point, medical is now on the ballot to be voted. And this was in 2012, that election. And so I went home, and my father and I, when I had gone to the hospital, he had asked me straight up, because we had never had the conversation. He was like, listen, I got to ask, are you doing drugs? And I was like, no, but I smoke a lot of weed. At that point, it was a lot of cannabis I was interacting with. And he was like, Okay. And so when I was in the hospital, him and I really bonded, and I showed him a lot of the videos I was watching that showed a lot of the science coming out of like, hey, you guys were duped, right? This isn't the terrible thing that people were thinking was. And to my dad's credit, he was like, wow, guess I was wrong. Okay. I'd much rather you do this than interact with pharmaceuticals. And if this is working with you for you, and I know you're getting good grades in school, like, hey, you got this. It's your life. Right. And so after that, I came home and I told him, I was like, I want to do this. And he was like, all right, awesome. And I was a broke college student at this point. So he decided, I'm going to pay for it for you. And it wasn't too much. It was like $600, but we started going together, right? He didn't join, but he would come to all the open houses with me. And he really, pushed me to be like really involved. I'd be the first one in and the last one out. And around this time, my pirateness really started kicking in, because I started realizing like something is not adding up in terms of like, I'm going to school for psychology, but yet I don't really want to use it in the way they're talking about. I don't really like khakis, and I don't want to be in an office. So like that it smelled like office supplies to me. So I was like, I know I don't want to do that. So after I went to this cannabis school, I started interning for them. And long story short, started really getting into cultivation. And my father and I started this project together. It was now legal, medical passed. I got my medical card. It was legal to cultivate, I think 6 plants or something. So we started a little father-son project. My father's business was going under, and he needed a good distraction. He was going through a lot of challenges himself. And so we started as a father-son project, like, hey, let's, I wanted to save money and not have to purchase cannabis from dispensary. And, he was starting to get interested in trying it out for himself. And so we started it, and it was a beautiful, beautiful time. And, through this time going to the school, I started interacting with a lot of people that had cancer, that had epilepsy, and the founders of the school were helping people acquire what's called full extract cannabis oil, or Rick Simpson oil, which, for those that are unaware, THC is shown to kill cancer cells, right? So they were making this really potent oil. And there's actually this whole theory that, in the Bible, Jesus is talked about as having this anointing oil. And there's actually a formula in the Bible, if you go far enough back, that it was pretty much a metric fuck ton of hemp, basically. And so, correlation doesn't necessarily equal causation, but it was very interesting. And so I started witnessing the healing powers of cannabis, and I started witnessing these people that had cancer come in. And of course, they were doing other things along with it. They were getting their diet better. They were, down regulating their nervous system. But, this THC was killing their cancer cells, right? And these people would come in with CAT scans and MRIs showing tumors. And then a series of time later, they would come in with no tumors, right? And this goes against everything that we hear about, how cancer operates in the body and all this stuff. And so I really started, having a deep, deep affinity for this plant. And so I started really getting into organic regenerative agriculture, because I was really curious about food, which again was like another pirate thing, right? Everyone's saying, do this, I'm doing this. Everyone's doing this, I'm doing this, right? So, throughout that time, around 2014, I started going to music festivals. And this was one of the first times I interacted with other plant medicines, because I was super cautious. Like, I still had a lot of like stigma around them. And I was like, am I going to rot my brain? Things like that. Right. And so I remember there was a time where, and I'll give the context for this too, in terms of pirateness, but, there was this time where we were in a steakhouse. We were in Vegas, me and 2 of my friends, and we were getting ready to go to Electric Daisy Carnival in Las Vegas, right? Big, huge festival, wild time. And this was the first time that I ever I interacted with cannabis. And we were at dinner, and I got this like sharp pain in my chest. And I had been thinking about my father, and it was a very interesting feeling. And it was the first time that like really intuition kicked in, and I was like, something's off. And so long story short, I get home, and about 2 weeks later, he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And so around that time, him and I had been cultivating, and I ended up taking all of that cannabis and turning it into full extract cannabis oil. And through that time, I helped my father through end of life with cannabis. And, this goes against pretty much, like I said, everything that these modern industries talk about. And it really started giving me like a little bit of a crisis, right? Because I started realizing like, okay, what am I going to do from here? And so after he passed, about 4 months later, a dispensary opened near me, and I applied, and I got the job. And around then, I started like, this was when like people were still getting raided out in California. We didn't know if we were going to get raided, right? So you talk about being a pirate, right? Like not knowing if you're going to go to work and get arrested. It was pretty fun actually. And so, from there, like, my love for cannabis took off. My love for psychology, intertwined perfectly into it. I worked with over 5,000 patients that were dealing with cancer, that were dealing with epilepsy, that were dealing with Crohn's disease. I mean, everything from police officers to lawyers to little old ladies to teachers to principals to librarians. I mean, you really got to see that this plant helps everyone. And so, that was when I finally decided, like, yeah, I'm a pirate. Like, this is what I do. I mean, like, I'm okay with seeming crazy to most of the world because I'm being true to myself. And that is a little bit of my pirate journey. I mean, it goes on and on, but that's really how it got started.
Yeah, that's a great, it's a great story. Of course, you told it wonderfully. So thank you. Thank you. So with the work that you're doing with cannabis, what is the social rebellion that you're working towards?
Yeah, that's a great question because, like, plant medicines are now starting to get a lot more popularity, right? Johns Hopkins, Harvard, a lot of these people are coming out, a lot of these institutions are coming out with quantifiable science, right? For those science worshipers who, are like, I got to trust the science, right? Where's the science? There's actually like applicable science now they can look at and go, oh, okay, there's actually like real people doing studies on this. But the thing is that they're only looking at the quantifiable side of things, right? So like, what is a cannabinoid? How does it work with cancer? How does it work with epilepsy, et cetera, right? No one's really looking into how cannabis works as a spiritual medicine in the human being. And so my whole social rebellion here is really understanding that there's unconscious, rampant use in the industry, right? Like, I was a part of it for a long time, where it's like, hey, cannabis won't give you cancer, so just smoke it all day, every day, right? And what happens is, and what happened to me is that, and it's no fault of cannabis, right? I take full responsibility for this. Cannabis is simply a plant, but what a lot of people are doing is they're interacting with this plant to hide trauma, right? It's the same addictive pattern that you see in a lot of other, areas, alcohol, tobacco, pornography. I mean, anything, exercise. I mean, it's the same pattern, right? And so what I'm doing with Connect with Cannabis is allowing people to take their power back in their relationship with cannabis, right? Like, cannabis is a feminine plant. And so, the feminine side of things is all planning, right? It's creativity, it's all this stuff, but the masculine is what allows you to take action. And so this is the classic stoner archetype of like someone who gets high and they sit on the couch all day, right? And people are like, oh, it's because they're interacting with cannabis. It's like, no, it's because they're a lazy person and the cannabis is accentuating that, right? They've yet to tune into that masculine component of them, whether they're female or male, right? And that's why one of the things I always teach people is like, hey, if you're looking to interact with cannabis because you're looking to access creativity and maybe you have a project you're doing, right? You have to make sure that, like, after you interact with cannabis, you get yourself into the mode to take action, because that's not cannabis's job. Cannabis's job is not to take action. So really, like, the social rebellion that, really I'm focusing on is the fact of personal power, right? Like, take your personal power back in this relationship, right? Cannabis is not the one to blame here, the same way that alcohol is not to blame, pornography is not to blame, exercise is not to blame. It's all within you. And that can sound harsh, right? Of course, not to you guys. We all do the same work with coaching, but it can sound harsh until you realize that, well, if I'm causing this challenge, right? If this challenge is within me, then I have all the power to change it. And if I have the power to change that, I have the power to change everything in my life. And so what I do with Connect with Cannabis is I provide the long lost user manual for cannabis, right? As a spiritual medicine, and what cannabis actually is, what it does, which is allow you to move from 3D reality, which is your mind, into your 4D reality. And so really, like, the social rebellion I'm doing is allowing people to turn from 3D to 4D to 5D, which is the integration of the mind and the heart to allow you to access higher realms of consciousness. And it's a fucking blast. I really can't believe this is my job. I can believe it, right? Negation, acknowledged, accepted. Yeah. But it's still, I got to pinch myself sometimes because, I made an unspoken deal with cannabis. It was really through a ceremony where her and I connected, and I just felt this feeling of like, this is what I'm meant to do, right? And I didn't know exactly what that meant. And over the last 5 years specifically, that path has presented itself in some beautiful ways. And so, my idea for how I'm saying what no one else is saying with cannabis is that, yes, you can go online and learn so much information about the quantitative science, which is very beneficial, right? How this plant works, how it grows, et cetera. but no one's talking about the qualitative side of science. And the qualitative science is where science meets spirituality. And for anyone who's like, what is he talking about? Think about it this way. I'll give you an example. So everyone loves someone in their life, right? I imagine you love 2 or more people. Can you tell me how many units of love you have for one person versus another, right? It's like, no, it's immeasurable. Well, okay, that's an example of qualitative science. It's from the heart, it's from the body, it's qualitative data, and it's from 4D reality, where just because it's not measurable or seeable with the eyes does not mean it's not real, because we only see 4% of visible reality. And this is why that quote that is like my ethos at this point is, wise is the man who knows he does not know, right? So my whole mission is to allow people to realize that the best gift in life is not knowing anything. It's actually the absence of knowing, and it's the presence of open-minded curiosity and awareness, right? Of knowing, like, if I don't know anything, then anything is a possibility. And if anything is a possibility, then magic can be real. God, Santa Claus can be real if you want to believe in that. Like, really what it comes down to is we have 7.5 billion different realities on this planet. Every single person has a different lease on reality. And what I choose to believe is what I feel in my body feels true to me. And that's simply my truth, right? I don't expect anyone to agree with what I say. And that's why, my program and the program that Alex and I have created, we're testing it out to see if it will fail. That's what we're doing, and that's like the whole like scientific method side, right? And so far it's exploded people's perspective on this plant, and it's allowed people to open their minds and access their pirate self so much more, because again, like, pirates do what other people don't do, right? And what is a lot of people not doing? They're not okay with agreeing to disagree with someone, right? Like, philosophers in the past, they weren't having discussions to coerce people or to, have everyone agree. They were hearing different perspectives so they could allow their minds and hearts to open and go, what if that is true? What does that mean for me? And so that's what we're doing with our social rebellion, is allowing people to open back up to who and what they truly are.
There's so much there that you said that I love. And one tiny little tidbit that I just wanted to make, share a little story. You're talking about quantitative measure of your love. And, one of the things that my partner and I will be like, how much do you love me? He's like, 4. I'm like, only 4? He's like, you don't know what the scale is. I'm like, that's true. I don't know the scale. It's like a little inside joke about it. It's like 4 awesome. Out of 3. I'm like, oh, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm acing this.
Lance and I he'll be like, I love you this much. I'm like, okay, well, I love you this much. And he's like, that's not very much. I'm like, yeah, but when the scale is this to this.
Yes. Well, I love this, because, that's a perfect example of how, like, anything we think we know is just waiting to be disproven, right? I mean, what was it? Electricity seemed crazy and woo-woo until it wasn't. Lobotomies were the best thing until now they seem ridiculous, right? So, science is an ever evolving thing. And like, arts like biogeometry, which is another huge passion of mine, that is pure qualitative science, right? And so, things like this are really clicking back on now. And there's a lot of cognitive shifts and collective shifts happening in society where people are starting to realize that, like, yeah, I don't know why, but I feel this. And so I'm going to quit my job and do it. I don't have any logical reason, right? And so you can see this shift happening. And so my duty is to help people embody that, right? And tell them it's okay. It's okay not to know. It doesn't make you who you are because of what you know. Who you are and what makes you who you are is how much you embody love in yourself, and therefore how much you can project it out into the world, because that's what life is truly about, right? It's about accessing the love within and then putting it into the things you do, because they have an energetic resonance and an energetic signature. And so, like, that's why, Enlifted has, resonated so highly with all of us, right? Because Mark and Adam love what they do, and they love the people that work with them. And you can just feel it when you do it, right? Like, there's a big difference between walking into a corporate store and walking into a mom and pop store, right? You can feel the difference, right? You might not be able to put a label on it, but you can feel it, right? If you tune in and you do the practices that allow you to, down regulate and create available space, every human can do this, right? It's not a special thing that only certain people have. Everyone is able to do this. That's what I choose to believe anyway.
Speaking of the love, it's been about a little over a year since you were here in my house, and we had our 2-day party.
Yes.
And then we've had a few others since. And one thing that kept coming up with like, there's not a lot going into it, and everybody's having an amazing time and breakthroughs are happening. And when we questioned it and looked at it, what was the one thing that was true every time was the love that was there, the love that went into it, and every single time.
Absolutely. I mean, love is the governing body of the universe, right? And, for people that might be challenged with this, look into the modern mystery schools, right? Like these lineages. And the reason that a human follows a lineage is because a lot of these things are really hard to wrap your head and mind around, and your heart around even, right? If you're doing it on your own, because if you're on your own, you're simply developing at your own pace. And, this is why, shamans are part of lineages, right? Like the people that are the most spiritually advanced always are in a lineage. And so like, if anyone's curious about these types of things, look into the things like the modern mystery school. I mean, you want to talk pirates? I mean, being able to activate people's DNA, being able to access knowledge that's 8,000 years old from the Hermetic line of Hermes and, re-updated with King Solomon. I mean, there's rabbit holes you can go down that like really allow you to realize why these pirates that are coming online now, these people that are doing things that other people are not doing, are so strong in doing it, right? Like, and they're so confident in doing it because they're coming from a deeper source of knowing, which is faith. And there's a big reason why, faith is talked about in every religion, right? Like I'm not necessarily a religious person, but I'm an extremely spiritual person because I truly believe that religion is when people stopped actually having the spiritual experience for themselves and started writing it down. And then people stopped actually experiencing it, right? Which is right brain, which is 4D, which is exactly what we're talking about, right? And love is one of those things that when you experience it, you know it. You don't have to logically explain it, right? It just you feel it. And that's what we felt at your party, right? Like that was what was flying through every person's heart, every person's mind. I mean, we were laughing, we were dancing, we had cool lights on, we were celebrating the new year together. It was so magical. And love is what allows that to happen because it's who and what we truly are, right? We are love embodied. We're infinite spirit embodied in a physical form that has a soul bridging the gap between the physical realm and the spiritual realm. And that's the gift we get to embody this in this life is if we can remember that we are love, then we get to like essentially win the game. We get to become a god, right? Elohim, as the mystery schools talk about, while we're still in physical form. And that is like the ultimate expression of a pirate, if you ask me.
Yeah, there's oftentimes, and maybe oversimplifying things, but for me, it boils down to two things. I'm either acting out of love or out of fear. And there's a lot of times where I have to just ask myself, when I'm reacting to something, are you acting out of love or out of fear right now? And oftentimes the answer simply is I'm acting out of fear. And if I just turn that and make that switch, like, how can I react to this or respond to this out of love? It completely changes the situation for me. And, like I said, maybe it's oversimplifying it. But I found that really helpful for me to ask myself.
I love the idea of over like quote unquote oversimplification because in my experience, the happiest people are like the farmers that live simple lives, right? Life is simple, right? We have overcomplicated it because we live in a very left brain dominant society. And the left brain is great. It has a lot of amazing properties, right? It's amazing to be able to do calculus and do geometry, but at what cost, right? Like, a lot of people are stuck in the left brain. And like the Tao Te Ching talks about, the whole like point, if you want to call it that, to anything in life is not to swing to one end of the spectrum or the other. It's to find the middle point, right? So it's to be able to use like the left brain when you're driving to work, right? Say if you're going to a coaching appointment, you use the left brain to drive there and then you use the right brain to coach that person, right? So it's about finding that balance. And, really like, that's why, everyone is now, not everyone, binary language and knowledge, but a lot of people are becoming more interested in, ancient art forms such as breath work and meditation. I mean, they're on the rise and they're like the hot thing now. And it's because when you subtract from the equation of yourself, you can then simplify your life and you realize that like you don't need to have this perceived control, which is completely a falsehood anyway. There's no control over anything that happens in life. And when you don't have that control, you're then able to just flow through life and you're able to, yes, it takes action, right? Like you can't just sit on your couch and expect life to come to you. But at the same time, like you don't have to pack your schedule with 16-hour days because you are scared, essentially, and living in scarcity, that if you don't do that, you're not going to make it, right? You can, like the lion sleeps 20 hours a day, right? You know why? Because he has complete faith in himself that he can make the kill in the 4 hours that he's awake, right? He has that's why he's the king of the jungle, right? Because an elephant sees a lion and says to himself, run. A lion sees an elephant and goes lunch, right? It's all mindset, right? And it's all heart set. And that's like, again, like, that's the beauty of simplifying life. So I love oversimplification. I think it's like almost an oxymoron, because simplification, and like, I think the only reason that oversimplification is a term now is because people are so far removed from how simple life gets to be when you embody that. And so they're like, well, I have to really oversimplify it. That's what my coach is telling me. That's what this spiritual teacher is telling me. And really, it's just getting back to what humans were meant to do, which is just experience life and let your heart lead you where you want to be, or where you're meant to be.
Speaking of lions too, on Instagram, there's the account Nature is Metal.
Oh, yes.
And recently they had a post with a giraffe. It was an older giraffe, but there were 3 lionesses just waiting patiently. They gripped onto the giraffe, and it was basically waiting out time, but they clung to her and were persistent in waiting until that giraffe finally went down. So a lot of things you can learn from lions, as well as knowing I've only got 4 hours and I'm going to do it. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, there's so much we can learn from nature. I mean, not to get super esoteric, but again, this is like cool pirate stuff, right? Because we're talking about us being pirates, right? So, like, I firmly believe that, in the mystery school lineages, they talk about how there's 7 dimensions to reality, right? And we're existing in the 3rd dimension, which is where our matter, right? Our vibration is slowed down enough that we seem solid, right? And so we're not actually solid. We're just vibrating beings. Everything is vibrating at a certain level. And the more solid something seems, like a rock, the lower its vibrational state. And our God in this world is nature. And that's why people say that humans as a species are only as healthy. They can only be as healthy as the earth is healthy. And that's why you're starting to see like this divide, right? And you're starting to see like the people that are really starting to turn on to the idea of like, hey, I want to farm organically. I want to be nice to everyone, even if I don't agree with them, right? Like, let them live their own experience of life. And then essentially they're on the surrendering side of the pendulum. And then you see the other side that's like, no, we're living in fear. We have to control everything. Stay safe, right? And they're on the control side, right? And they're also the ones that are fine, like taking oil from the earth and cutting down rainforests and doing all these things because they're like, well, I'll be okay, but they have no awareness of what that's doing to the collective and our version of God in this reality, which is the earth. And so like, one of the cool things that, I love about pirates, right? When you really learn about pirates, like in Be More Pirate, is, they were turned on to this idea way back when, right? They were allowing same-sex marriage. They were allowing women to work and have equal rights, right? Like, these people are looked at as like bad people, when really the bad people were the people that, I mean, if you want to call people bad, right? It's all perspective, but the people that were like less on their game, if you will, were the people that were trying to fall in line with society. And personally, like, if, in my own experience of life, that's why I've always gone against what society says, because I've always known like in most cases, a very immature way to look at life. Like, it's a very lone wolf type thing, the type way to look at life. And I like to translate lone wolf into lonely wolf, right? It's a bunch of hurt people hurting people, and they have no awareness of it. They're unconscious to it. And, it is what it is, right? And so, I think pirates were some of the first people that started actually using their feeling body and going, hey, you know what? It feels good when we live in our own terms. It feels good when we let women work if they want to work. It feels good when we pay everyone a fair wage. It feels good when we allow 2 men or 2 women to marry because they love each other. We don't need to understand why. Who cares? That's their life. This is my life. I choose this for me, and that's awesome. High five that you're doing exactly what makes you happy. Like, I think like pirate culture is exactly what's exploding once again. True pirate culture, not the ones you learn about in school where they cast them as the bad people, right? Because of course, like, they're coming at it from a perspective, if you want to look at it that way, where, society is good and fall in line and, be a good girl or good boy and pay your taxes and then just die, right? Like just, go sit in your cubicle for a while. And maybe at your 65, if you played all your cards perfectly right, you'll get to retire and you might still have a working body. And then from the, from eating out of the vending machine and all those things, and fingers crossed, you'll be able to take one awesome vacation to Florida if you live in the US, right? Or like Bali if you live in Australia, right? And so like, to me, that just reeked of just like, no, right off the bat. And I feel as though that's exactly what we're tapping into with when we look at pirates, right? And it's same, very same.
Well, one of the things that really has come up for me in terms of pirates is just having that pirate crew. And one of the things that we actually discussed on our last episode with your friend Rob Carney, I was reading a book called The Price of Tomorrow, and just talking about like one of the big issues is that sometimes that we need to take a little less for ourselves for the betterment of the collective, right? Which I think is something that the pirate crews really embody, right? The captain doesn't take, 200 times the share that, the lowly deckhand does, right? You're talking about equal and fair pay. And the problem with society right now is that we are all looking out for what benefits me above and beyond, screw everybody else, right? So if we all have that mindset and that intention of doing what's going to benefit ourselves rather than the collective, then we're really going to end up nowhere, right? Because we have to have the betterment of the collective in mind. And so this is where I really appreciate the like social rebellions of the people that are working towards, we had our climate pirate on here, Francisca Elmer, like people that are working towards the betterment of something that's going to help the collective rather than that selfish reasonings for doing things, right? So that's why I love pirates, because I think so many of our pirates are working for something that's going to be the betterment of the collective, and that's where our society needs to go if we're going to move forward.
Yeah, there's two choices, abundance or scarcity, right? And what do those things mean when you really dive into them, right? What I choose to believe and what I've experienced in my own feelings and my own life and my own experience of life is that abundance is essentially telling yourself, hey, I know I'm an infinite being. And so this life is a party and I want to make sure everyone has the best time. You're going to be the hostess with the mostest, right? And scarcity is everything in life is chance. I have to, make, this is all there is, and I'm going to die soon. And what happens then? And, what if I don't have enough food? So I'm going to hoard everything. Right. And, you see this in society, right? Like it's starting to change, but like this whole idea of like, cut everyone down to get to the top, and, work harder than other people because, you're better than them and all this stuff. And it's so cheesy. Like, I'm just like, guys, stop taking yourself so seriously. Right. Like yawn. I remember my first lifetime too, it's like, you know what I mean? Like I really like allow anyone listening, and I invite anyone listening to like, just tune into that, right? Like, get clear, do a meditation, and then ask yourself what feels better. And I imagine everyone listening to this show is already on the same side we're talking about, but it really helps to be able to double down and do these exercises, because then you can share them with other people. And that's another great thing that cannabis does, because a lot of people are stuck in their mind, right? And so if you want to tell them about like this idea of like abundance versus scarcity, they're like, I don't really know. But you interact with some cannabis in them and you have them meditate and they're like, whoa, I felt something different. I don't know what that is. And now they've been stretched and they can't go back, because once Pandora's box is opened, it can't be closed. And so like, that's how I see it, as abundance versus scarcity, and we all have a choice, and again, like, I firmly believe that we have a mission in this life, as a soul embodied in physical form, as infinite spirit that has a soul that's embodied in physical form. And so, really it's like, what do you want to be remembered for, right? What is your legacy, right? Because, I look at people like, Bill Gates and people like that, and people that are, scared in some way, shape, or form. And they honestly, I choose to believe that everyone thinks they're doing the best with the information they have available, right? But the problem is that a lot of people are unaware of how the mind works, and they're unaware of how the lower ego and the higher ego work. And the lower ego is attached to the subconscious, and it's riddled with trauma and limiting stories and limiting beliefs. And the higher ego is the attachment to your higher self, right? The infinite source of who you are. And so you can see, like, as you start learning this stuff, like you can just look at someone and tell which side they're coming from, right? And again, it's no judgment. Like, I'm not judging them from going that. I've been there myself, right? But it's more so just an observation and a genuine curiosity, right? Like, that's why I've loved psychology for so long, because I enjoy seeing people that live life differently, right? I'm not going to force anyone to live life this way. That's not my intention, right? It's just, there are certain people, like all of us on this call, and I imagine a lot of people, everyone that's listening to this podcast, that know what side of the fence they want to be on, right? They know they want to be a good person, and they might not be able to logically explain why, right? Oh, so my kids think I'm good, so my wife thinks I'm good, or my husband thinks I'm good. Yes, those might be reasons, but there's something deeper than that, right? There's something about like being able to look yourself in the mirror. And I notice a big trend between, people that are exhibiting those lower ego symptoms and are like hurting other people. And again, they're hurt themselves and they're hurting people, and more addictive tendencies, right? Like more alcoholism, more drug use, more things like this. And, an inability to really look at themselves in the mirror. And I think that's, you want to talk about a real pandemic. I think that's really what's going on right now, is that a lot of people are hurting. And at the same time, a lot of other people are healing. And so this divide, quote unquote, is starting to get more and more obvious. And that's why it might seem like things are more chaotic than ever. But as I always say, who wins in Star Wars, right? Like, you want to talk about pirates, Jedis are pirates, right? And who wins, right? The Jedi, because they're coming from a place of love, and the Siths are coming from the absence of love, which is fear, right? It's nothing, right? And so when you look at it that way, it's like you either have all the power or you have none, right? You have perceived power. And it's like David Hawkins talks about, power versus force, right? Power is coming from love. Force comes from fear. It's the difference between, I know you can do this because I know how good of a person you are, and you need to do this because if not, you're going to die, right? Power versus force, two totally different realms. And the quicker that we can all turn online to this and embody it, the more that other people will want to figure out what we're doing, because this stuff is attractive, right? Like, everyone wants to be happy. And so when you're around a person like any of us on this call, or anyone listening, or anyone that's doing this work, right? For any of you listening, I guarantee that all of you are doing this in some way, where you're putting love into something you're doing, and then you go talk about it around people. They're like, hey, how'd you get there, right? And those are the people that you should focus on. Don't try to force your way of living on everyone, because it's not right for everyone in this lifetime. It's not right for everyone at this time. But there are certain people that will resonate with what you mean and what you're saying. And the way that I always say it is, what I've come to realize is that there's 7.5 billion people on this planet, right? I was a people pleaser for a long time. Now I try to state exactly what I feel, and I try to be as honest. I'm as honest as possible about how I feel. And my intention is, I can never make 7.5 billion people happy. So let's get as many out of the way as possible, so I can find the people that are directly resonating with my message, because that's all I care about. If you don't like what I'm saying, if you don't agree with it, awesome, live your own truth, right? But there are certain people that will resonate with each of our truths. And that's what pirates did, right? They weren't forcing people to be pirates. They were like, hey, we're doing it this way, and if you want to do it, awesome, come on board. You're equal rights. Like, we'll give you good pay. We'll take care of you. You're part of our family now, right? If not, hey, awesome. I hope you have a great life otherwise. So
there was no press gangs to join a pirate ship or a pirate crew.
Exactly. And misery loves company, right? Love doesn't need company, because love is infinite, right? Love is abundance. Love is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And what I mean by that, I know it sounds strange, but like, what I mean is, when you fully unlock love within yourself, all you need is yourself, right? And it doesn't mean that you don't love everyone around you, but it's a difference, right? Coming from want and need, right? Like, I've used this example before, like in a relationship, what is more attractive, right? I want you, or I need you, right? Like, it might sound like need is more attractive, right? Like, even when I think about it, I'm like, oh, it sounds attractive, right? But at the same time, if someone literally depends on you to take a breath, like, that is a lot of pressure to put on someone, versus like, all I need is myself, and I really want you, right? Like, it's a total different energy, and that's where I choose to come from, because it works for me and it helps my experience of life be more grand and beautiful. And that's all we can hope for.
There's a couple of things in there. Well, there was lots in there. The most recent thing you said, I just remember having that conversation with guys I dated, and there was a lot of men that could not handle the fact that I didn't need them.
Mm.
I'm like, if I'm here, it's because I choose to be, because I want to be. I don't need you. I have my own job. I have my own money. I'm not dependent on you. And I found that a lot of men were not comfortable with a woman who didn't need them. It was
Yes.
surprising.
It's an epidemic within men. You know, I coach mostly men, and a lot of them have this challenge. And you know, it's interesting because I can understand right where it comes from. I don't embody that myself by any means, but I can understand where it comes from. They're coming from scarcity, right? They think that what they're worth is what they do, because that's what they've been told since they were a kid, right? Get a good job because it's what you're worth. And then they want to provide for someone, right? It's an ancient thing that men all have programmed within us. But there's nothing better for me as a man, right? As a man who enjoys women, and you guys know my partner, Rachel, like there is nothing more attractive to me that lights me up than her going and doing her retreats and seeing her like just embody pure divine feminine energy, and knowing that she could exist perfectly fine without me, right? And that the reason she's here is because she's choosing to, because she wants to. Like that is the best thing ever. Like I love that.
Absolutely. And then the other thing I love the fact that you brought up Star Wars. This was a while ago.
Yes.
Because a few nights ago, you know, we were just watching Return of the Jedi, as you do on a random like Thursday evening. And it just really brought home like, you know, towards the end of the movie there, where they're trying to force Luke into choosing fear over love. And he ends up obviously choosing love, and how that, it was contagious, right? And that's the point where, you know, where his father, in case, spoiler alert, in case you know we haven't seen the whatever 30+ year spoiler. You know, the fact that, you know, Darth Vader chose love, and protected his son, because I do think that love, I believe love is contagious. When you act from love, then it helps other people to act from that place of love as well. So I had to throw that nerdy little Star Wars in there.
You know,
since
like
you brought it up.
Yeah, no, you know, if anyone hangs out with me long enough, which isn't going to be that long, I'll bring up Star Wars, because, you know, these stories, you know, like George Lucas, I don't know everyone that wrote the movie, but like these guys got it in a big way, right? And again, like just like the Bible is not meant to be read literally, Star Wars is not meant to be looked at literally. There's messages in there that are like meant to program you in the right way, right? And you know, we talk you know, I talk a lot about, you know, the media and all these things that are instilling fear right in people, and how they program your mind that way, and your subconscious mind and your lower ego. Well, I truly believe that just like in Star Wars, there's love and the absence of love, you know, kind of like fighting, if for lack of a better term, each other. And so like you go on the Gaia network, right? And that is pure love, right? Like you stop watching that after 3 hours and you feel supercharged. You feel like the best of the best, right? And I know that it's challenging because we've been programmed to like get off on fear, right? And like violence and things like that. I was too, right? It's taken a long time to break that feeling of like satisfaction being a violent film, or, you know, something that's really like adrenaline rushing, right? And I'm not saying that I'll never watch that stuff, right? But it's just like, I get to consciously choose now, hey, am I about to coach someone tomorrow? I'm going to watch Gaia then, right? Or like, hey, I have a week off. Maybe I'll watch something a little more violent, a little more adrenaline rushing, right? And so it's just about being conscious. And, you know, you mentioned love being contagious, and this is one of the best gifts that we can give other people. Like we were talking about earlier, like when you choose to embody love, it is the most basic human instinct that even if someone has no idea that what love is or what fear is or any of this stuff, they're going to be attracted to you, right? Not just in a romantic way. Like I'm talking like a platonic way. Like they're going to want to be around you. And this is the whole idea of battery chargers versus battery drainers, right? And battery chargers are people that empower other people. Battery drainers are people that disempower people, right? Think about energy vampires. I don't know if you've seen that show. This is What We Do in the Dark. It's like a hilarious show about different types of vampires. And it's like a complete like comedy thing. But there's this one guy who he's like a super like nerdy dude, and he's an energy vampire, and he works in an office building. And so he'll go over to people's desks and he's like, yeah, you know what I like to do is just go over and drain their energy. And like, you'll see him talking to them and he'll be like, yeah, did you get those spreadsheets? You know, like, and then you'll just see them like falling over because they're like so dead. And so like, that's, you know, and again, like I believe that the battery drainers are unconscious to this, right? They've been programmed that they want to talk about their problems because they honestly believe that talking about them will help, right? And they've been taught that because of, they hear like half of what therapy is, like talk about your problems. Well, it's not just talking about your problems, it's talking about your problems and having someone go, what if it was your fault, right? What if the power's in you to fix that, right? Like that's the part of that conversation they're missing. And to bring it back to pirates once again, like these people were battery chargers, right? Like they were people that empowered people, right? No matter what you think about pirates, they empowered people to live life on their own terms. They were battery chargers.
Speaking of like the battery drainer versus battery charger, I used to be like in the morning at work. It was great vent time. Be like, oh, nobody cares that I have a life outside of work. They keep me all the time. And it seemed like this is how you bond with people. And this is the way to go. But I would be tired. It would tire me out. And then once I started learning about language and how it affects, like, I was thinking more of the language coming out of my head and then out of my mouth. And one day all of a sudden I'm like, it's in my head. It's in my head worse than it's coming out of my mouth. Like yes. I'm in here telling myself all of these stories. And I realized what really struck for me was that the they that I was so mad at didn't exist. When I really tried to figure out who they was, it wasn't anybody. I was like, I'm not picturing a single person.
Yeah. It was a projection, right? That you were feeling within you and then projecting outwards. And, I did this for many years too. And, I want to be clear too, right? Because, when you complain about things, you will feel like you're getting energized, like gossiping, things like that. Like I used to love that kind of stuff, right? Because it would make you feel like or maybe make it more personal. It would make me feel like I have a leg up on people and I know what's going on, but they don't, right? And let me explain what's going on there. So there's two different places to get energy, right? Light energy or dark energy. And both will energize you, right? They'll feel like they're energizing you. But love energy, AKA like empowering people. Wow, what a great job you're doing. Hey, like, I got stuck in traffic today, but it was great because I got to listen to my book on Audible longer. And, yes, I was late to work. You know what? I'm going to make sure I wake up a little bit earlier to get there on time to make sure that I'm present and I'm, here and I'm fulfilling my duties, yada, yada, right? Instead of playing the blame game. That form of energy actually beams you up, right? And it reduces cortisol, it reduces adrenaline, it reduces norepinephrine, right? It allows you to feel solid within yourself because you are putting all of your personal power back into you where it belongs. The other side, yes, it will give you a perceived energy, but you know what that energy is? A cortisol spike, norepinephrine, adrenaline, right? Like anger, right? All of those things. And when you look at David Hawkins' scale of consciousness that he talks about in Power versus Force, the whole idea is that depending on where you are, your consciousness, like depending on where your consciousness is at, you're going to be stuck in different states of moods. And so like guilt, hate, apathy, shame, all of that is like below 150. Anger actually is like a better one than those because that resonates at 150, which is actually like right below. I think next is pride at 175. And then at 200, it's like pretty much the neutral point. That's when you start to be able to get out of victimhood, right? And like Jesus Christ and Buddha, they calibrated at 1,000. And the way he does this, I won't get into a super big rabbit hole because it goes deep, but for anyone curious, like look up Power versus Force because there's not many ways to test objective truths, right? Because again, we all have our own lease on reality. So what I believe is true might not resonate at all with someone else, right? And that's the whole purpose of being able to mirror ourselves as God in human form, is that what we are doing in this reality is, I firmly believe it's Elohim or the God of this universe and galaxy and all that stuff, becoming aware of itself. It's seeing all the infinite possibilities of what it is because it wants to learn what it is, right? And so if you want to test something objectively, you can use a form of testing called muscle testing. And so basically what you can do is, if you can see me on camera, you'll hold your arm out, right? And you need a partner to do this. And so you could hold like this cup of cacao and you could say, this cup of cacao is healthy for me. And then this person will press down in your arm. And if it is good for you, you'll be like, there'll be an immediate response. Like you want to try it. If it's not good for you, you won't be able to respond to it. Right. And this is like one of the most scientifically studied forms of, objective truths out there. And David Hawkins, I mean, talk about an absolute unit of a man. I mean, this guy is like ultra high level person. And you can test anything that way. You can test an idea. I really invite anyone to test things that are going on right now in society, right? This event going on is true, and test it, right? I'm not going to mention events, but you can learn a lot through those kind of things. And you can try it on different people to make sure it's not you. And, I know that a lot of this is like, wait, that's got to be false. Try it on as many people, right? You'll find exact similarities no matter who you test it on. And when it comes to like events like that, but this is a great way to figure out what foods are right for you. Anything. So yeah, I wanted to mention that as well. I don't know how I got down that rabbit hole, but I love going down rabbit holes with you guys. So
The best part of this podcast is we don't even really have to ask you any questions.
No.
So.
Yeah. Well, you guys know I'm a chatty Cathy, right? Like this is why I have 2 podcasts, everyone, right? Like Rachel was like, please, like put this on someone else. And so it's so funny because, I love coming on other podcasts because, it's so much fun to be able to chat about these things and especially talk about things that I'm so passionate about, which is like, really what being a pirate is, which is choosing your own path in life, no matter what anyone thinks about it or cares about it or anything, right? It's right for you. And that's all that matters, right? Because again, at the end of the day, the only person that we get to be proud of, that we like, I'll put a have to in there. The only person that we're required rather to be proud of is ourselves, right? And the only person we're required to love is ourselves, right? From there, everything is possible. Without that, nothing is possible. And that's why, once again, to the degree that you are out of alignment with who and what you truly are, is the degree to which you are going to find distractions in your life, right? Constant cycles of busyness, addictive patterns, binging food, hanging out with the wrong people just because you want to get out of your house because you can't stand being alone, right? All of these things. And so it's a strong correlation, right? Like for anyone listening, this is a great way to gauge where you're at in terms of your pirateness, right? Like being a pirate could literally be doing what everyone else is doing if that feels right for you, right? It doesn't mean you have to do, anything. It means doing what you want to do for you and no one else.
Totally.
Yes.
Yes.
So where can our listeners go to find out more about you?
So, the best place to reach me is Instagram. I'm at the real Ryan Sprague because there's some fakes out there, right? And so I had to make sure
None of those
it
fakes.
was the real one. Yeah, exactly. Who knows who's in different dimensions too, and all this stuff. So at
You
the
gotta
real Ryan
verify
Sprague,
yourself. Verify.
Yes, exactly. I'm getting there quickly. I can't wait to have that blue check mark and shovel those other Ryan Spragues under the rug.
Exactly.
Just kidding. I love all you guys too, but
Yeah, you know what? I was so surprised. Sorry to cut you off. I was so surprised when I created my Instagram. I'm like, I've never met another Quran. How is there another Coach Quran in here? Like, come on.
Yes. Well, what's really funny on that wavelength, Theo Vaughn, who's one of the funniest comedians. Like this guy is just like he's exactly the type of comedy I love. What he would used to do is he would go on Facebook and find all the Theo Vaughns out there and start a group chat and just kind of like be like, hey guys, I connected us, blah blah blah, and then he would just peace out, and he would just watch all of them be like, who started this chat, get me out of this thread. Like it was like absolutely hysterical. And so I've often thought about doing that. Like, we need to come together, Ryan Spragues, all right? We all have the exact same name and it's the coolest name ever, right? Like guilty as charged. And so yeah, I love that. But the other places that people can find me at highly.optimized is the business Instagram, and we put out constant content on informative things around cannabis and how you can take a lot of the things we do and try it out, right at home, right? You don't have to purchase anything. It's just free, right? We want to empower people to get better results with their relationship with cannabis and therefore their relationship with themselves, because any relationship is just a projection of your own relationship with yourself. And so we put those out all the time. You can definitely find me on the Highly Optimized podcast and the This One Time on Psychedelics podcasts. Those are both on Spotify, iTunes, and pretty much everywhere podcasts can be found. I release new episodes every Wednesday on Highly Optimized and every Friday on This One Time on Psychedelics. Super fun. And I think that's about it. We're going to be creating a Facebook group soon, free community for people to be a part of that love cannabis and want to learn more and be stewards of the plant. And I think that's it.
A lot of places.
Yeah, quite a few.
So how would you recommend that our listeners begin their own pirate journey?
Get still within yourself. Subtract from the equation of yourself. give yourself some breathing room and tune into what your heart is telling you, and trust that it will lead you exactly where you're meant to be. And wherever you're meant to be is ultimately where you'll be your most pirate self. And so that's what I would start with.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
And our final, most important question of the day. Do you know any pirate jokes?
Oh, okay. So I had a pirate joke when I originally filled out the form, and I think it might be escaping me in this moment.
Okay.
So
we do have one.
All right, you have one?
Of course, we are always prepared.
Perfect. Please indulge me.
Although I'd like a Ryan joke too.
Yes. I'll think about any joke possible, because really at the end of the day, any joke could be a pirate joke, because the person that tells it is a pirate, then it's a pirate joke, you know? So I'll think while you're telling me yours.
Okay.
See what I can come up with.
So what did the pirate say when his wooden leg got stuck in the freezer?
What?
Shiver me timbers.
Oh, that's so good. See, the only jokes I can think of is actually Rachel's joke, and it's extremely dirty. So I'm not even sure if you guys want that on here. That might be like
how dirty?
Yeah, how dirty?
Yeah, it's pretty dirty. But like she comes out with these jokes that, like, because she's little cute little like 5'3" innocent Rachel. Like, I love when she tells this joke, because it literally like it absolutely geeks people out. So I'll save that one, because it is like pretty grotesque and pretty hilarious. I'm trying to think of any others I have off the top of my head, but they're not coming to mind or heart right now. I guess I got lost in the sauce of this beautiful conversation. And
lost in the sauce.
Yes.
My favorite anywhere are the Ryan one-liners that take you a second to catch up to, and then it's like, oh, that was funny. That was really funny. Like, you have this one about a dog, like watching your dog run across.
Oh, yes. So that one, I will tell that one. It's not really a joke, but it's a great saying. And I like, the way I operate is I like to have like a bunch of like one-liners. And this is like a great tip for anyone who wants to be like a public speaker, or wants to be like in like some sort of limelight where you're telling jokes or something like that. Whenever anyone says something to you, you want to have a list of things that you can come off the cuff with, right? So I have all these different things, right? So like, if people are talking about the Midwest, I'll be like, oh yeah, so flat, you can watch your dog run away for days, you know? And that's that one. So I guess that counts as a joke.
It does. It's a Ryan one-liner. That's what it is.
Guilty as charged, you know?
Awesome. Well, this has been so great having you chat with us on this podcast, and, you know, the half an hour before this podcast.
Yes.
It's been so great to connect with you and have you on our show finally.
Thank you. Yes, my heart is so full. Thank you, ladies, so much. I love what you were doing. You guys are crushing it. And I'm so excited to see what transpires in your collective journeys with this podcast. I mean, you know, one of the best things about podcasts are who you meet through them, and, you know, how many relationships you can see yourself mirrored back in, and how much you can learn about yourself through doing this. And so I'm so excited for you guys, you know, beginning this journey and already being on this journey, and, you know, continuing this for years and years to come, and evolving into the exact people that you're meant to be. It's beautiful. So yes, from one podcaster to another, I love you guys.
Thank you. We love you too.
And we're grateful for the opportunity to return to you what you've given to us already. So we love that we got to hear your story today.
Thank you so much. Yes, I love sharing it. And, you know, it's really like, it's so amazing to share with like-minded individuals, because we all have such powerful stories. And, you know, I choose to believe that, you know, really what these stories do is they help us realize how similar we are, right? Where, you know, we've been told a lot that because of the color of our skin or the gender we are, or any of these things, that we're different, right? But really, we're all humans having a human experience, or we're all souls having a human experience. And so I love being able to share stories. And I think that's really what storytelling is about at its core, right? It is about, you know, inspiring people to realize that we're all similar, right? We're all the exact same, and yet we're very different, right? And it's just a beautiful experience. And I'm so grateful to be alive during this time where we get to podcast. And even though we're in different areas of the world, we still get to see each other's faces and exchange energy through the interwebs. I mean, can you imagine how boring this pandemic would have been if this happened in 1991? Like, oh my goodness, yikes. Let alone there was pandemics in the 1800s, but, you know, that's for another conversation.
Yeah, the Spanish flu must have been so boring.
Yeah. It's like boring buzzkill.
Rock and roll, guys. There are no rules. This one goes to 11.